Hello and welcome to the Fifth Down Huddle. Today is April 28th, 2020. Hope you're having a great day. Like and subscribe if you do enjoy this content that I'm about to show you, and other content that I do put out on Spotify, YouTube, BuzzSprout, and other places, Twitter, Instagram, all under the common name Fifth Down Huddle. So let's huddle up right away. So first up, we have the NFL Draft, arguably the second biggest event in football behind the Super Bowl. And I'm recording this on Monday so that I could have some time to look over the draft choices and to especially look at how every quarterback choice will affect the team they do. I mean, when we look at teams drafting quarterbacks, especially early on, it often has to do. I mean, not a lot of teams draft backups. Not a lot of teams do. Of course, besides the Seahawks this year, I mean, even their general manager said that they drafted a quarterback just in case Russell Wilson gets injured again. But often, especially in the early draft choices, the picks are meant to turn a team around, such as the Bengals, the Dolphins, or the Chargers, which were the first three teams to take a quarterback this draft. So let's see. I'm going to talk about here how I believe each quarterback is going to do, if they're going to turn their team around, or if it's going to take a while, if it's going to be right away. Here we go. So number one, the first pick was Joe Burrow for the Bengals. I like Joe Burrow. I like his attitude. He's got some confidence to him. He's got some style, some swagger. But Joe Burrow, he's no longer on LSU. He is going to the Cincinnati Bengals, which, as we know, and I won't bring up the argument of, weapons, even though that is a valid argument. It's more complicated than that. So I won't just straight up say the Bengals don't have a lot of good weapons like LSU has. But what they also don't have is a good organization. The Bengals are not a good organization. We've seen it throughout history. They had a solid quarterback in Carson Palmer who brought, I think, more than one team to the playoffs, and they weren't able to make anything happen. So now Joe Burrow is in. And if I had to bet money on it, Joe Burrow is going to be the next Carson Palmer. That's what he's going to be. Or no, my apologies. Carson Palmer, I believe, was on the Cardinals. But Joe Burrow is still going to be the next Carson Palmer. I made a little mess up there because I've been thinking about Joe Burrow a lot like Carson Palmer. Carson Palmer was a big prospect out of the draft. And Joe Burrow checks all the boxes. He's got the form, he's got the accuracy, he's got the attitude, he's got the brain, he's got the decision-making, he's got it all. And he can run with his legs every once in a while. He is a great quarterback prospect. But as much as you are a great quarterback prospect, we have seen time and time again amazing quarterback prospects, Jamarcus Russell, and just several down the line. I won't name every single one, but we have seen them get picked number one overall and completely flutter out. I mean, you look at Johnny Manziel, everybody loved his attitude. It was this kind of confidence to him, a little cocky, but not too bad, and it was all Johnny football. He was making plays happen, he checked all the boxes. And he went to the Browns, which are not a very solid organization. As we've seen in history, they don't win a lot of games, and they don't have a very good coaching staff. Not only that, but they also don't have a good front office. And that transition to being a big-time star in college football, where receivers are a lot more open, is really, really hard for those quarterbacks to make into the NFL. Especially because, and I'm not saying Joe Burrow can't throw into tight windows, but it becomes so much harder in the NFL to have those big plays that they're so used to. And it'll be interesting to see how Joe Burrow transitions to the NFL, but if I had to bet my money on it, I think, it's 60% chance he has no better than a Carson Palmer career. But on the other hand, I say there's a 30-40% chance he has Peyton Manning-like career. He has that potential. He really does. But it's all about if he can turn this Bengals team around. The Bengals have brought in several different quarterbacks, and they haven't been turned around. So then we look to the second pick here with Tua Tagovailoa and the Dolphins. Now, honestly, for me, for who I would bet my money on to be the most successful quarterback out of this draft class, it would either be 1, Tua, or 2, Jake Fromm. And I'll explain why here. First off, Tua Tagovailoa is a great quarterback prospect. Honestly, he could have been the number 1 overall pick if he hadn't been injured. I think that really, really hurt his draft. I mean, it's obvious it did because he got picked as the second quarterback rather than the first. But he is a solid quarterback. He's a great prospect. He can work well with his legs. He reminds you a lot of Patrick Mahomes. And he's just a great quarterback prospect. And it's understandable why, the hype has kind of gone away from him due to the injury. I mean, we haven't really seen him play a ton in the past year. But I believe that potential is still there. And I don't think that injury took much away from it. Is he going to be injured in his career? I think it's very possible. But I also believe that the Dolphins will teach him a few ways, more than one, to keep him from being injured. And if you want to know why, it's because of their coach Brian Flores, who was with the Patriots for a few years, with the quarterback who seems to not ever take an injury. I mean, yes, he gets a little banged up. He did have an injury midway through his career that cut him out, but ever since then, hasn't missed a game to injury. And I'm not saying that necessarily means there's some magic trick, but I am saying that if there's anything that's going to help Tua become less injury prone, it's Brian Flores. And the other best case would be either the backup to Brady or with the Patriots. But either way, Tua Tagovailoa is a great prospect. And just looking into it, yes, the Dolphins don't have a very good roster. They brought on a ton of talent, though, especially defensively this offseason. But what I like most about Tua's situation with the Dolphins is their coaching staff. Brian Flores is a great head coach. We saw that last season. Now, it's difficult to tell if through the first half of the season the Dolphins were kind of tanking. It was difficult to tell, but as the season went on, it seemed they really hit their stride late in the season. And they won a couple games in a row. They beat the Patriots even. They beat the Patriots at home in Foxborough. I mean, we always hear about the Dolphins beating the Patriots in Florida, but in Foxborough? Come on. You need a good coach to do that with that type of roster, especially when the Patriots are trying to make the playoffs. And, well, not trying to make the playoffs, but trying to get a decent, maybe even a first-round bye. If they could have won that game, they would have at least had home field advantage. I think that's something pretty good to think about. Now, the Dolphins, they're not a great team yet, but long-term, I see Tua Tagovailoa having a lot more success with the Dolphins than I trust that Joe Burrow will have with the Bengals. The Bengals head coach is not very proven yet. Zach Taylor, he's not very proven. I'm going to have to see him really show that he can make something happen, because last season didn't tell us much. Last season with the Dolphins, at least at the end, we learned a bit about Brian Flores and how he can bring that team together. We didn't learn a lot from Zach Taylor. So then we move on to the third picked quarterback, Justin Herbert, who is now on the Chargers. They have Tyrod Taylor right now. He's been named the starter week 1, and I understand that. You don't want to force Justin Herbert in. But it's interesting with Justin Herbert. He had some moments here and there where he seemed like he could be a pretty top prospect. And I'm not saying he wasn't. He definitely is. But he seems to kind of slip below the hype, if you know what I mean. You don't hear a whole ton about Justin Herbert. You mainly hear about, Joe Burrow, Tua, Jordan Love. You don't hear a ton about Justin Herbert. And I think the Chargers might have snuck him in pretty well. I think Justin Herbert will have a solid career with the Chargers. I think he'll have a similar career to Jared Goff. He reminds me a lot of Jared Goff, and I see a possibility of Justin Herbert having a similar career to Jared Goff. Not terrible, not really Hall of Fame worthy, but a franchise quarterback. A franchise guy like Jimmy Garoppolo or like Dak Prescott or Kirk Cousins. Just a franchise quarterback. Solid pick. Now, 4 and 5 are some interesting situations because both the Packers and the Eagles picked a quarterback. But both the Packers and the Eagles have starting quarterbacks with some time left in their career. Now, with the Packers, it's a little different than with the Eagles, but it's interesting nonetheless. The Packers drafted Jordan Love in the first round. Rather than getting an extra target for Aaron Rodgers, which even before the draft, he said, he literally is quoted to saying he thought it would be pretty cool if they drafted a skill position, and they haven't in a long, long time. In the first round, that is. But it would be and there was another statistic I just saw today on the NFL's Instagram. There's a statistic that shows that Aaron Rodgers has only thrown one touchdown pass his entire career to a first-round pick wide receiver. And it was a tight end, Mercedes Lewis, of all players. So obviously he has not had a first-round threat in a while. Now, am I saying Devontae Adams is bad? No. But I do believe he could use a few more receiving targets if they really want to max out his potential for the remainder of his career. But bringing Jordan Love in, it reminds me of a podcast I listened to a while back. I listened to a podcast that kind of dove in to the Brett Favre-Aaron Rodgers relationship and how Brett Favre was just really, really offended by the Packers kind of putting him in check, putting a clock on him, shot clock per se, where they're like, look, we have a quarterback for you. The second you start to fumble the ball, second you start to fumble out, we're kicking you out. We got a guy. And it's interesting because this is a similar situation. Aaron Rodgers is getting old. We can't deny that. Now, we haven't seen a ton of that showing up in his gameplay, but he's getting old. And that regression comes for every player in the NFL. And it'll be really, really interesting to see. Jordan Love is the new Aaron Rodgers to Brett Favre. And Aaron Rodgers is the new Brett Favre to Aaron Rodgers. It's the exact same situation. And it's going to be really interesting because in that podcast, they talked a lot about how Brett Favre was not good to Aaron Rodgers. You know, he didn't really help him develop. He kind of had an angst to him because he was like, I'm the starting man. I'm not giving this job up. Come on, I got time left in my career. Are you guys trying to force me out? And it's just really interesting to think about how that could be the same thing here. Now, what could be interesting is that Aaron Rodgers says, you know what? I hated how Brett Favre treated me. I'm going to treat Jordan Love better. It'll just be really, really interesting to see what happens there. Because like I said, Jordan Love is the new Aaron Rodgers to Brett Favre, and it will be so interesting to see how Aaron Rodgers turns around and treats Jordan Love. Now, another situation comes with the Eagles, Jalen Hurts. That's equally interesting because we've seen how injury-prone Carson Wentz is. Now, I don't believe that they're trying to move on from Carson Wentz. I don't think that's what they're trying to do here. I truly believe that they are just trying to have a contingency plan in, or an emergency plan, I should say, where if Carson Wentz gets injured, career-ending injury possibly, because it seems every season he's out at the end of the year. So, quite possibly, Jalen Hurts could be the backup man to take him to the Super Bowl, and that's probably what they're hoping for, a new Nick Foles. But then we move on to Jake Fromm with the Bills. Now, this is another very interesting one, because I believe Jake Fromm is a great prospect. I mean, you look back a year ago today, people were saying Jake Fromm is going to be the number 1 overall pick in the 2020 draft. Now here we are today, he was the 6th quarterback taken. It's going to be really, really interesting to see what the Bills decide to do with that. They have a really good quarterback in Jake Fromm. I believe that Jake Fromm can have a great career if he gets the chance to do so. If Josh Allen doesn't pan out, and he panned out a little more last season, but if he for some reason falls off or shows a break in his skill, it could be possible that we see Jake Fromm take the field, and it could be possible that Jake Fromm takes that starting job. Then we move to the 7th quarterback taken in the draft, Jacob Eason to the Colts. Now this one's also interesting because I don't know if Jacob Eason is a franchise guy. He's a solid quarterback, but I don't know if he's going to be able to transition well to the NFL in a starting job. Maybe if you take a year to develop him under Phillip Rivers, a veteran quarterback, that might work out well. But if there's any quarterback that I say is going to not have much of a career in this, it's either Jacob Eason or our next quarterback, James Morgan, to the Jets. Especially James Morgan, because they already have Sam Darnold in the position. Now, if he keeps seeing ghosts, James Morgan might have a chance. But Jacob Eason on the Colts is probably my top pick for a quarterback that's not going to pan out at all. Okay, so something else I wanted to talk about here was the notion that the Patriots won't be in the playoffs for a while. or at least won't be competitive in them if they do make the playoffs. Now, it will be a competitive division. Like I said, the Dolphins took Tua, and the Bills are growing and getting better. The Jets will eventually get somewhere, I'm guessing, at least playoff ready. But the AFC East is turning into a competitive division. But even with that, Stidham is their man. All right, Belichick believes in Stidham. He said after the draft, or it was kind of the notion that he gave out was, or that the Patriots front office gave out was, Jarrett Stidham's our guy. And compared to every other quarterback in this draft, even Joe Burrow, Jarrett Stidham is better in their eyes. And that his greatest attribute is his insane throwing accuracy. And I say if Belichick believes in him, we should believe in him too. Quarterbacks that Belichick has believed in have done off pretty well. Jimmy Garoppolo is now the franchise guy for San Francisco. Belichick at one point wanted him instead of Brady. They have a solid defense and drafted around that. They got a lot of nice defensive additions. They filled some nice holes like the tight end position. And it's interesting because they draft nobodies who often came from worse, knowing they will strive for the best. Stephon Gilmore came from the Bills. He did not have a great resume in terms of football. He was not a number one corner. Patriots got him and turned him into the best corner in the league. Defensive Player of the Year. Butler was a no one. Now, to be fair, once he went to the Titans, he was also a no one. But Malcolm Butler turned into a number one cornerback, or at least a number two cornerback, because of the Patriot system. Edelman was a nobody who was a quarterback in college, shifted to wide receiver, and then got drafted by the Patriots. And there's many, many other examples I can go through. But he finds people who have that chip and gives them a chance to work at it. What I mean by that is, these players have a chip on their shoulder, all right? They are hard-working players. You look at the person they drafted in the first round of this year. A lot of people don't realize is that he is a solid draft choice. Yes, he came from a D2 college. Yes, he was playing against D2 receivers, but he has been on the grind throughout this recent part of his career. And I honestly think that's what the Patriots were attracted to. The grind that these players go through, the grind that Edelman went through, the grind that Brady went through to get even the starting spot for Michigan. You look at these players and they're grinding their entire career because nobody wants to give them a chance, because they don't have the raw talent that so many teams look to. And quite honestly, it's interesting how the Patriots seem to strike so hard every time. I don't think it's as complicated as we think it is. I think it's more about the mental side of football that the Patriots look to rather than just the raw talent side. So really, overall, I do not buy the notion that the Patriots are not going to be a playoff team really far into the future. But you look at the history of the Patriots with Bill Belichick, yes, before Brady, it was tough for them. Before Brady, Belichick does not have a great record, but you also have to look at the season he was with the Patriots without Brady. And that was when Brady tore his ACL in 2013 or 2011, one of those two. But Brady went out for the year. Matt Castle goes in. Matt Castle throws over 3,000 yards, doesn't stink it up on the field, doesn't fall apart. Looks like a decent franchise guy. Looks like a Kirk Cousins type season. A solid guy who got the job done. Was he astonishing? No. Did he make your head turn? No. But what did make your head turn was the fact that they had an 11-5 record without Brady. So then you're sitting there for a second thinking to yourself, well, geez, maybe Brady isn't everything that this team is. And, you know, it's interesting because all the Patriots haters, and I'm not a Patriots hater, I'm not a Patriots fan, but I'm not a Patriots hater. They say, you know, oh, Brady's a system quarterback. Well, if he's a system quarterback, then the Patriots should still be a playoff team. I mean, those same people are the ones saying that the Patriots are not going to make the playoffs. Well, pick one. Because if Brady's a system guy, then Jarrett Stidham is about to win 6 Super Bowls in a row. And if the Patriots aren't going to make the playoffs, then that means Brady is not a system quarterback. Now, granted, I don't know if Jarrett Stidham is going to cause the Patriots to make the playoffs in year one. It's kind of a hit or miss thing. Now, Belichick, like I said, believes in Stidham. So that's where the majority of my trust in Stidham comes from, is just the simple fact that Belichick believes in him. Belichick believed in Matt Castle, and we saw where that went. So, again, just the fact that Belichick is okay with Stidham starting. And he said even more recently that Stidham and Hoyer are both equal candidates for the starting position. So, clearly Belichick is comfortable with where he's sitting at quarterback. And I don't think Belichick is the type of quarterback to tank for a or is the type of coach to tank for a quarterback. I just don't think he is. And we can look at that from the 1 year that they were without Brady. He didn't give up. He went right to the backup and got to work. They didn't make the playoffs, but they went 11-5. The Eagles went 9-7 this past year and were first in their division. So, you tell me. But overall, the Patriots are still going to be a playoff team here into the future. Super far into the future, it's hard to tell. This next year, it's hard to tell. I can't say for sure if he will be, or if the Patriots will be a playoff team this next season, but I assure you that at least within these next 2 years, they are not going anywhere. And you will see the New England Patriots in the playoffs once again very shortly. So in other recent news, Jameis Winston has gone to the New Orleans Saints. That's an interesting thing because the Saints have Drew Brees, and as in recent news as to what the Saints have said about who they want to be the franchise guy past Drew Brees, because we all know Drew Brees is eventually going to retire. It's inevitable. Every quarterback is eventually going to retire. Aaron Rodgers is eventually going to retire, and Jordan Love will eventually take his place. Tom Brady is eventually going to retire. It's going to happen. Now, for Drew Brees, he contemplated retirement this offseason, which really shows you that he's kind of teeter-tottering on the edge, which means that this could very well be his last season in New Orleans. So it's very, very interesting to me, the fact that Jameis Winston is going to New Orleans. I personally believe that it is New Orleans setting themselves up well for the future. By bringing in Jameis Winston to work with Drew Brees, they are giving Jameis Winston a final shot. A 1-year deal, proved to us in training camp, in the workouts, and practice against the second team, prove to us that you can do it. And we'll keep you and give you a shot when Drew Brees is out of here. And I think that's their way of saying, all right, well, we know nobody else is going to sign Jameis Winston, so we'll give him a cheap deal, and we'll just give him a shot. And I believe that if Jameis Winston shows up in practices, if he shows up in training camp, he could very well be the next man up for the Saints. They have a great roster all around, and maybe that's what Jameis Winston needs to work with. Now, granted, Tampa Bay does have a great roster, but also it would help Jameis Winston massively to work with a veteran quarterback like Drew Brees, who is arguably the or one of the best quarterbacks in the league right now. Right up there with Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Tom Brady. But yeah, Jameis Winston, he's not great, but he's good. Jameis Winston has talent. We've seen that. He has great throws. Like Bruce Arians said, there's a lot of good, but there's a hell of a lot of bad. It reminds me a lot of Jordan Love in his past year in college. He threw 20 touchdowns and 17 interceptions. Jordan Love, there's a lot of upside. The Patriots were talking about it recently. They, in an interview, I believe it was one of the Patriots scouters, said that, Jordan Love has a lot of raw talent, granted. But on the flip side, Jordan Love throws a lot of wacky interceptions and makes just some completely random decision making that it's like Jordan Love has 10 plays that are great. He throws nice throws, he throws it away when he needs to, scrambles when he can, makes some nice adjustments. Then all of a sudden he throws a terrible pass and it ends up being an interception. And that's where those 17 interceptions came from. So when you look at a guy like Jordan Love, it's like, oof, that's freaky. And And that same comparison can be made then to Jameis Winston about how there's a lot of upside, but there's a lot of downside. Now, that interception can be fixed. We've seen that. Peyton Manning threw over 20 interceptions in his first career season in the NFL. Now, granted, Jameis Winston's a little bit past his first season in the NFL, but if you could fix Peyton Manning, now I'm not saying Jameis Winston is Peyton Manning, but I am saying it's fixable. And that the potential and greatness is still there for Jameis Winston. The same way it was still there for Peyton Manning, and the same way it's still there for Jordan Love. I believe he can be turned around. But is it a long shot? Yes. I wouldn't bet money on the idea of Jameis Winston leading the Saints to the playoffs 3 years from now. I wouldn't bet money on that. But it's very interesting, and especially for Saints fans now, when you look towards the future and you look towards, okay, where are we after Drew Brees? They only have one Super Bowl with Drew Brees. They should go for a Super Bowl right now. Brandon Marshall recently in a ESPN interview was talking about how the Saints window is gone. He was declaring their case closed, saying, look, they've made the playoffs these past 2 years. I mean, even before that, but these past 2 years they've been knocked out back-to-back against the same team, not to mention. So Brandon Marshall saying they're gone. Now, granted, they have not been able to perform in the playoffs, at least recently. And that's not good at all. But right now is the Saints' chance to win a Super Bowl. They have a few more obstacles now in terms of Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers putting up a little bit of a roadblock in the division, possibly getting a first-round bye. That will be interesting. But as we all know, and as I'm willing to argue, the NFC is stronger than the AFC. There's a lot more 4-12 teams in the AFC than there are in the NFC. And there are a lot more teams on the rise in the NFC than there are in the AFC. You look at the Titans, the Jaguars, the Cardinals, the list goes on. But the Saints need to win a Super Bowl now because their future past that is clearly unknown. The simple fact that they're bringing on Jameis Winston proves that they are not very 100% on their future. They're bringing in a guy who threw over 30 interceptions in a single season last year. And they're bringing him in as a candidate for the future. It's the only reason they'd bring him in. Taysom Hill's a solid backup. They don't need another backup quarterback. They're bringing Jameis Winston in to say, hey, why not? We don't really know where we're going to go. Taysom Hill has thrown less completions in his career than Jameis Winston has thrown interceptions. So it's a little hard to say that Taysom Hill is the future for the Saints. He's got the talent, but is he the future? We don't know. We don't know how he's going to perform when he has to play every single snap in a game and continue to throw the ball deep, continue to throw the ball accurately without breaks. That'll be interesting. But the same thing goes for Jameis Winston. So as I said, that is probably the most interesting storyline out of all of this, is the fact that the Saints aren't 100% on Taysom Hill. This signing shows it. It says, look, Taysom Hill, we like you, but we're not sure, so we're going to bring in an extra chance just to see, can we pull some Peyton Manning greatness out of Jameis Winston? If not, then, we'll resort back to you. But Taysom Hill's, you're our number one choice, but Jameis Winston, maybe. If you're 100% on a quarterback, you're going to put time into getting him ready. Not signing a guy like Jameis Winston to mess with Taysom Hill's head or to fight for the backup job. It doesn't make a lot of sense if you're 100% on Taysom Hill. Especially just spending cap space on Jameis Winston. It just doesn't make logical sense. So in my eyes, the only reason for bringing in Jameis Winston is to, like I said, give him a shot at that future for the Saints. And like I said, it'll be interesting to see what happens, but man, Jameis Winston in a Saints uniform is going to be weird. Just as Tom Brady in a Tampa Bay uniform. This is probably one of the craziest NFL off seasons we've seen in a while. A lot of veterans moving around. But anyways, I'll call the episode here. We're at 29.5 minutes. Next week's episode will be dropped earlier. I wanted to give it a day and a half just to be able to think about the draft a little bit more for my section on the quarterbacks. But yeah, thank you so much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Check me out on Spotify, BuzzSprout, Anywhere the podcasts are, I'll be there. YouTube, which is probably where you are right now. But thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.